The helicopter's blades cut through the humid Florida air as tech billionaire Sebastian Wright surveyed the vast expanse of land he had just purchased for his latest conservation venture. At 45, Sebastian had built an empire worth $30 billion, but recently found himself searching for something money couldn't buy, a sense of purpose beyond profit margins and stock valuations. The 10,000-acre property he'd acquired was meant to become a wildlife sanctuary, a place where endangered species could roam free under his protection. As the helicopter descended toward the property's eastern boundary, Sebastian's pilot, Captain Maria Santos, pointed toward a cluster of dilapidated buildings partially hidden by overgrown vegetation. "Mr. Wright, those structures weren't mentioned in the property survey. Looks like some kind of old facility." Sebastian studied the buildings through binoculars, his curiosity piqued. The structures appeared to be concrete bunkers or warehouses, their walls stained with rust and decay. Tall metal fencing surrounded the complex, topped with razor wire that gleamed menacingly in the afternoon sun. Whatever had operated here had clearly been abandoned for years, but something about the setup made Sebastian uneasy. "Set us down near those buildings, Maria. I want to take a closer look." As they landed in a clearing 50 yards from the mysterious complex, Sebastian was struck by the oppressive silence that hung over the area. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. It was as if nature itself avoided this place. The smell hit him as soon as he stepped from the helicopter, a mixture of decay, rust, and something else he couldn't identify but that made his stomach turn. Sebastian approached the facility's main gate, which hung open on rusted hinges. A faded sign barely visible through years of weathering read, "Hartwell Research Facility, authorized personnel only." The billionaire's unease deepened as he realized this had been some kind of experimental operation, though for what purpose remained unclear. Moving deeper into the complex, Sebastian discovered a series of concrete buildings connected by covered walkways. Most appeared to be laboratories or administrative offices, their windows dark and doors sealed. But it was the sound that drew his attention, a low, mournful cry that seemed to echo from the largest building at the complex's center. The sound was unmistakably that of an animal in distress, a deep, resonant moan that spoke of prolonged suffering. Sebastian felt his heart rate increase as he approached the source, his businessman's instincts warring with his humanitarian impulses. Whatever was making that sound had been abandoned here, left to suffer in isolation. The main building's entrance was secured with a heavy chain and padlock, but years of corrosion had weakened the metal. Sebastian found a rusty piece of rebar nearby and managed to break the chain after several minutes of effort. The heavy door swung open with a metallic screech that seemed to echo endlessly through the empty corridors inside. The interior was a maze of concrete hallways lined with metal doors, each bearing a number and a small observation window. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls, powered by what Sebastian assumed was an automated backup system. The smell of decay was stronger here, mixed with the sharp odor of disinfectant and something else, fear. Following the sound of the crying animal, Sebastian made his way deeper into the facility. The mournful cries grew louder as he approached the building's central area, where he discovered a large chamber filled with steel cages of various sizes. Most were empty, their doors hanging open like mouths frozen in silent screams. But in the far corner of the room, one cage remained occupied. The sight that greeted Sebastian would haunt him for the rest of his life. Inside a cage barely large enough to contain his massive frame stood Atlas, a magnificent Spanish fighting bull whose black coat had lost its luster from years of confinement. The animal's powerful shoulders pressed against the bars on either side, while his head hung low in defeat. But it was Atlas's eyes that broke Sebastian's heart, dark, intelligent orbs filled with a depth of sadness that seemed almost human. As Sebastian approached, Atlas lifted his head and made eye contact with the billionaire. The bull's cry intensified, becoming almost conversational, as if he were trying to communicate years of suffering and abandonment. Tears, actual tears, streamed down the animal's face, leaving dark tracks in his dusty coat. Sebastian had seen many things in his business career that had tested his resolve, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Here was a creature of obvious intelligence and nobility, reduced to a broken shadow of what he should have been. The bull's condition spoke of years of neglect. His ribs were visible beneath his coat, his hooves were overgrown, and several old injuries had healed improperly without veterinary care. "My God," Sebastian whispered, his voice echoing in the empty chamber. "What did they do to you?" Atlas responded with another mournful cry, this one softer, as if he recognized that help had finally arrived. The bull's tail swished weakly, and he took a tentative step toward the front of his cage, bringing him as close to Sebastian as the bars would allow. Sebastian examined the cage's locking mechanism, a complex electronic system that appeared to require a security code. But like everything else in the facility, years of neglect had taken their toll. The digital display flickered intermittently, and corrosion had eaten away at several of the components. As Sebastian studied the lock, Atlas pressed his massive head against the bars, bringing his face as close to the billionaire as possible. The bull's breath was warm against Sebastian's skin, and the businessman found himself staring into eyes that held an intelligence and awareness that defied everything he thought he knew about animals. "Don't worry, big guy," Sebastian said softly, placing his hand on Atlas's broad forehead through the bars. "I'm going to get you out of here. Whatever happened in this place, it's over now." Atlas seemed to understand, his crying subsiding to a soft rumble that vibrated through his massive chest. For the first time in what Sebastian suspected had been years, the bull's eyes showed something other than despair. They showed hope. Sebastian pulled out his satellite phone and called his head of security. "James, I need you to get me the best animal rescue team money can buy, and I need them here within 2 hours. Also, contact Dr. Elizabeth Morrison at the University of Florida Veterinary School. Tell her it's an emergency and money is no object." As he ended the call, Sebastian looked back at Atlas, who continued to watch him with those impossibly expressive eyes. The billionaire had no idea what experiments had been conducted in this facility, or why Atlas had been left behind, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he would not leave this place without the bull. The discovery of Atlas would mark the beginning of a journey that would transform both their lives in ways neither could imagine, proving that sometimes the most meaningful connections transcend the boundaries of species, wealth, and circumstance. 2 hours after Sebastian's emergency call, the abandoned research facility buzzed with carefully orchestrated activity. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, Florida's leading large animal veterinarian, arrived with a full emergency response team, while Sebastian's security chief, James Rodriguez, coordinated with animal rescue specialists from 3 different organizations. The billionaire had spared no expense: portable medical equipment, specialized transport vehicles, and enough personnel to handle any emergency that might arise during Atlas's liberation. Dr. Morrison, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen decades of animal suffering, stood before Atlas's cage with an expression of barely controlled outrage. Her preliminary examination through the bars had revealed the extent of the bull's condition: malnutrition, untreated injuries, and psychological trauma that would require months of careful rehabilitation. "Mr. Wright, I've been practicing veterinary medicine for 28 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this," she said, her voice tight with professional fury. "This animal has been subjected to prolonged psychological torture. The physical neglect is bad enough, but the mental damage—" She shook her head, unable to finish the sentence. Sebastian watched as Atlas observed the newcomers with wary intelligence. The bull's demeanor had changed since the arrival of the rescue team. His crying had stopped, replaced by alert watchfulness as he assessed each new person who approached his cage. There was something almost strategic in the way Atlas positioned himself, as if he were evaluating potential threats and allies. "Doctor, what's your assessment of his chances?" Sebastian asked, though he was already prepared to do whatever was necessary regardless of the prognosis. "Physically, he's in better condition than I initially feared. Bulls are incredibly resilient animals, and despite years of neglect, his basic constitution appears sound. But psychologically," Dr. Morrison paused, studying Atlas with the eye of someone who understood animal behavior at the deepest level. "This bull has been through something that's fundamentally altered his relationship with humans. The trust issues alone will take enormous patience to overcome." James Rodriguez approached with a portable electronic device designed to override security systems. "Mr. Wright, our tech team has analyzed the locking mechanism. It's a military-grade system, probably installed when this was an active research facility. We can bypass it, but the process will create noise and vibration that might distress the animal." Sebastian looked at Atlas, who seemed to be following the conversation with remarkable attention. The bull's eyes moved from person to person as they spoke, and Sebastian could swear there was understanding in that gaze, not just awareness, but comprehension of the situation unfolding around him. "Atlas," Sebastian said softly, using the name he had instinctively chosen for the magnificent creature, "we're going to get you out of there, but it might be loud and scary for a few minutes. Can you trust us?" To everyone's amazement, Atlas responded with a low rumble that sounded almost like agreement. The bull moved to the back of his cage and lowered himself to the ground, adopting a position that would minimize his exposure to any debris or sparks from the lock-cutting process. If you believe animals deserve freedom and compassion, give this video a like to show your support for Atlas's rescue. Dr. Morrison stared in disbelief. In 3 decades of practice, I have never seen an animal demonstrate that level of situational awareness and cooperation. This bull understood exactly what you told him and responded appropriately. As James's team began the delicate process of cutting through the electronic lock, Sebastian found himself drawn into deeper conversation with Dr. Morrison about what they might expect from Atlas's recovery process. The veterinarian's experience with trauma cases had taught her that each animal responded differently to rehabilitation, but Atlas's obvious intelligence suggested possibilities that extended far beyond typical rescue scenarios. Mr. Wright, I need to prepare you for the reality that this bull may never fully trust humans again, Dr. Morrison warned. Animals who have experienced this level of systematic abuse often develop permanent behavioral changes. Even with the best care, Atlas may always remain fearful and defensive. But even as she spoke, Atlas was contradicting her assessment. The bull remained calm throughout the 30-minute process of cutting through his cage, occasionally rumbling softly as if offering encouragement to his rescuers. When sparks flew from the cutting equipment, he didn't panic or thrash. He simply closed his eyes and waited patiently for the work to continue. Finally, with a sharp crack, the electronic lock gave way. The cage door swung open for the first time in what Sebastian suspected had been years, revealing the full magnitude of Atlas's confinement. The space was barely large enough for the bull to turn around, with concrete walls stained by years of neglect and despair. Atlas remained motionless for several long moments, as if he couldn't quite believe that freedom was finally within reach. Then, slowly and deliberately, he rose to his feet and took a tentative step toward the open door. His massive hooves, overgrown from years without proper care, clicked against the concrete floor as he moved with careful dignity toward the threshold. Sebastian held his breath as Atlas paused at the cage entrance, his great head turning to look directly at the billionaire. In that moment of eye contact, something passed between them, an acknowledgement, a bond, a mutual recognition of what this moment represented. Then, Atlas stepped out of his prison. The bull's first steps of freedom were tentative, almost reverent, as if he were walking on sacred ground. His massive frame, despite years of confinement, moved with surprising grace as he explored the chamber that had been both his world and his hell for so long. But what struck everyone present was Atlas's immediate behavior. Rather than fleeing or showing aggression, he walked directly to Sebastian and gently pressed his forehead against the billionaire's chest. The gesture was so unexpectedly tender that several of the rescue team members felt tears welling in their eyes. Here was an animal who had every reason to hate and fear humans, offering trust and affection to the man who had freed him. Subscribe to our channel to follow Atlas's incredible journey from captivity to freedom. You won't believe what happens next, Dr. Morrison quickly moved to conduct a more thorough examination of Atlas now that he was accessible, her trained hands checking for injuries and assessing his overall condition. Atlas stood perfectly still during the examination, occasionally rumbling softly when the doctor found particularly tender areas, but never showing signs of aggression or fear. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Morrison murmured as she worked. "Everything about this bull's behavior contradicts what we know about trauma response in large animals. It's as if he understands that we're here to help him." As the sun began to set outside the abandoned facility, Sebastian made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Rather than transporting Atlas immediately to a veterinary facility, he chose to spend the night at the rescue site, sleeping in a tent beside the bull's temporary enclosure to ensure that Atlas felt safe and protected during his first night of freedom in years. Atlas seemed to approve of this arrangement, positioning himself as close to Sebastian's tent as possible and maintaining a quiet vigilance throughout the night. Every few hours, Sebastian would wake to find the bull's gentle eyes watching over him, as if Atlas had appointed himself as guardian of the man who had given him back his life. The rescue of Atlas was complete, but both the billionaire and the bull sensed that their story was just beginning. What neither could anticipate was how profoundly their bond would challenge everything the world thought it knew about intelligence, loyalty, and the capacity for forgiveness in the animal kingdom. 3 months after Atlas's rescue, Sebastian's newly established sanctuary had been transformed into something extraordinary. What had begun as a simple wildlife preserve had evolved into a revolutionary facility dedicated to understanding the remarkable intelligence that Atlas displayed daily. The bull's recovery had defied every expectation, but it was his behavior that truly amazed everyone who encountered him. Doctor? Morrison had set up a temporary residence on the property to monitor Atlas's progress, and her daily reports read more like science fiction than veterinary medicine. The bull had not only recovered physically with remarkable speed, but had begun demonstrating cognitive abilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about animal intelligence. Sebastian walked through the morning mist toward Atlas's expansive pasture, carrying his usual offering of fresh apples and carrots. The billionaire had established a routine of spending several hours each day with Atlas, and their bond had deepened into something that transcended typical human-animal relationships. As he approached the fence, Atlas was already waiting, having somehow sensed Sebastian's arrival despite being nearly half a mile away. "Good morning, my friend," Sebastian said softly, reaching through the fence to stroke Atlas's massive neck. The bull's coat had regained its lustrous black sheen, and his eyes now sparkled with health and vitality. But it was Atlas's response that continued to astound everyone. The bull rumbled a greeting that sounded almost conversational, his head movements and body language suggesting he was actively communicating. Dr. Morrison approached from the veterinary building, tablet in hand, an expression filled with barely contained excitement. "Sebastian, you need to see what Atlas did this morning." My research assistant, David, left his notebook on the fence post while checking the water systems. When he came back, Atlas had somehow opened it and was, well, you'll think I'm crazy, but he appeared to be studying the diagrams. Sebastian looked at Atlas, who watched the conversation with alert intelligence. "Show me the notebook." Dr. Morrison handed over the water-damaged notebook, its pages filled with technical drawings of the sanctuary's irrigation system. Several pages showed clear evidence of having been turned carefully, and one diagram bore what appeared to be a hoofprint, but positioned in such a way that it perfectly marked a crucial junction in the water flow system. "David swears he left the notebook closed," Dr. Morrison continued. "And this mark Atlas made, it's exactly where we've been having pressure problems in the irrigation system. It's as if he understood the diagram and was trying to help us identify the issue." As if to demonstrate the point, Atlas walked to a specific section of fence near a partially hidden irrigation control box. He stood beside it and rumbled softly, then looked directly at Sebastian and Dr. Morrison with unmistakable expectation. Sebastian approached the control box and discovered that one of the main valve controls had been gradually loosening over the past several weeks, causing the pressure drops Dr. Morrison's team had been investigating. The problem was in exactly the location Atlas had marked in the notebook. "This is impossible," Dr. Morrison whispered. "There's no precedent in the literature for this level of problem-solving ability in cattle. Atlas isn't just intelligent. He's demonstrating analytical thinking and environmental awareness that we don't even see in most primates. But Atlas's remarkable abilities extended far beyond technical problem-solving." Sebastian had begun bringing complex puzzles and games to their daily sessions, initially as enrichment activities, but increasingly as genuine collaboration. Atlas could solve mechanical puzzles that challenged even adult humans, and his memory for patterns and sequences seemed virtually unlimited. More remarkably still was Atlas's emotional intelligence. The bull had become a source of comfort for other rescued animals at the sanctuary, somehow sensing when newcomers were stressed or traumatized. Sebastian had witnessed Atlas approach frightened horses and gently touch them with his nose, remaining perfectly still until their anxiety subsided. Even wild animals seemed drawn to Atlas's calming presence. Dr. Morrison had begun documenting these interactions for what she suspected might become groundbreaking research in animal cognition. "Sebastian, I think we need to consider the possibility that Atlas's intelligence may be partially due to whatever experiments were conducted at that facility. The neural development we're seeing is unprecedented." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Maria Santos, Sebastian's pilot, who had become one of Atlas's most devoted admirers. "Mr. Wright, we have a situation developing at the main gate. There's a convoy of black SUVs demanding entry, claiming they have legal authority to reclaim Atlas." Sebastian felt his blood run cold. He had been expecting this confrontation ever since discovering Atlas, knowing that whoever had operated the research facility would eventually come looking for their property. But he had also spent 3 months preparing for this moment, assembling legal teams and documentation that would make removing Atlas nearly impossible. "How many vehicles?" Sebastian asked, his mind already shifting into the strategic thinking that had made him a billionaire. 6 SUVs. Looks like federal agents or private security. They're being led by a man in a suit who claims to represent something called the Prometheus Research Group." Atlas had been following the conversation with obvious concern, his intelligent eyes moving between the humans as they discussed the threat. When Sebastian approached to reassure him, the bull did something that left everyone speechless. He gently grasped Sebastian's sleeve with his teeth and began leading him toward the sanctuary's main building. Once there, Atlas positioned himself directly in front of the building's entrance and assumed a protective stance, his massive frame blocking access while his eyes remained fixed on the approach road. The message was unmistakable. Atlas understood that someone was coming to take him away, and he was prepared to defend both himself and the sanctuary that had become his home. Dr. Morrison stared in amazement. He's not just intelligent, Sebastian. He's strategic. Atlas understands the situation, and he's positioning himself tactically. As the convoy of vehicles wound its way up the sanctuary's access road, Sebastian stood beside Atlas, both of them ready to face whatever challenge lay ahead. The bull's transformation from broken prisoner to brilliant guardian was complete, but the true test of their bond was about to begin. The approaching vehicles carried more than just legal documents and corporate demands. They represented a collision between the world of profit and exploitation that had created Atlas's suffering, and the world of compassion and respect that had restored his dignity. Whatever happened next would determine not just Atlas's future, but the future of every animal who might benefit from the revolutionary discoveries his rescue had made possible. Sebastian placed his hand on Atlas's powerful shoulder, feeling the steady strength that had carried the bull through years of imprisonment and into this moment of defiance. Together, they would prove that some bonds transcended legal ownership, and that intelligence and loyalty could triumph over greed and cruelty. The battle for Atlas's freedom was about to begin, and both the billionaire and the bull were ready to fight for what they had built together. The convoy of black SUVs came to a halt in front of the sanctuary's main entrance, their tinted windows and imposing presence creating an atmosphere of corporate intimidation. Sebastian stood beside Atlas, both watching as 6 men in identical dark suits emerged from the vehicles, led by a tall, thin man whose cold eyes surveyed the property with calculating precision. Dr. Victor Hendricks, director of Prometheus Research Group, approached with the confident stride of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted through legal threats and corporate pressure. His pale face showed no emotion as he studied Atlas, but Sebastian noticed the slight widening of his eyes when he saw the bull's magnificent condition and alert posture. "Mr. Wright, I'm Dr. Hendricks. I believe you have something that belongs to my organization." His voice carried the clipped authority of someone used to corporate boardrooms and government contracts. "The animal you removed from our facility represents years of research and millions of dollars in development. We're here to reclaim our property." Sebastian stepped forward, his own billionaire's confidence matching Hendricks' corporate arrogance. "Dr. Hendricks, Atlas is not property. He's a sentient being who was abandoned in deplorable conditions. My legal team has already filed papers establishing this sanctuary as his permanent home." Hendricks smiled coldly, pulling out a tablet displaying official-looking documents. "I'm afraid your emotional attachment has clouded your judgment, Mr. Wright. This animal is the product of Project Athena, a classified research program funded by multiple government agencies. The intellectual property rights alone are worth more than your entire sanctuary." As the men talked, Atlas moved closer to Sebastian, his massive presence both protective and calming. Dr. Morrison had positioned herself near the main building, ready to document whatever was about to unfold. The tension was palpable as corporate power confronted humanitarian principles. "Tell me about Project Athena," Sebastian demanded, his investigative instincts aroused. "What did you do to Atlas?" Hendricks hesitated, clearly debating how much to reveal. The project involved enhancing cognitive capabilities in large mammals through advanced genetic therapy and neural stimulation protocols. Atlas represents our most successful subject, an animal with human-level intelligence capabilities. The revelation hit Sebastian like a physical blow. "You experimented on him. You turned him into some kind of living laboratory. We created a breakthrough in interspecies communication and cognitive enhancement," Hendricks replied defensively. "Atlas possesses the ability to understand complex concepts, solve advanced problems, and even demonstrate creative thinking. He's worth billions in potential applications." Atlas seemed to understand every word of the conversation, his dark eyes fixed on Hendricks with unmistakable hostility. The bull's breathing had changed, becoming deeper and more controlled, as if he were preparing for something significant. Dr. Morrison stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. "Dr. Hendricks, what specific enhancements were made?" "The cognitive abilities we've observed are beyond anything in the literature." Hendricks glanced at his security team before answering. "Targeted gene therapy to enhance neural development, combined with direct electrical stimulation of cognitive centers. Atlas received treatments over a 3-year period before the project was discontinued. Discontinued why? Sebastian pressed. Budget cuts. The military applications weren't developing as quickly as hoped, and civilian oversight became problematic. The facility was shut down, and the subject was scheduled for termination. The casual mention of Atlas's planned execution sent rage coursing through Sebastian's veins. You were going to kill him because your experiment didn't meet profit projections? At that moment, Atlas did something that left everyone speechless. The bull walked to Dr. Morrison's equipment case, carefully opened it with his teeth and removed a tablet computer. Using remarkable dexterity, he activated the device and began touching the screen with the tip of his nose, navigating through menus with obvious familiarity. Within minutes, Atlas had accessed a communication app and was spelling out words by touching letters on a virtual keyboard. Help me stay home. The silence that followed was profound. Even Hendrix's security team stared in amazement as Atlas continued typing, They hurt me. Sebastian saved me. This is my family now. Dr. Hendrix went pale as he realized the implications of what everyone had just witnessed. That's impossible. The communication protocols we developed never achieved that level of sophistication. Atlas turned the tablet toward Hendrix and typed a new message. You failed because you never asked what I wanted. The bull then did something that would be remembered forever by everyone present. He gently took the tablet to Sebastian and typed, Thank you for giving me a voice. I choose to stay with you. Dr. Morrison was frantically taking notes, her hands shaking with the magnitude of what she was documenting. This isn't just enhanced intelligence. Atlas has achieved genuine self-awareness and autonomous decision-making capability. Hendrix attempted to regain control of the situation. Regardless of his communication abilities, Atlas remains corporate property. We have legal documents establishing ownership. But Atlas wasn't finished. He returned to the tablet and began typing rapidly, his message appearing on the screen for everyone to read. I am not property. I am Atlas. I think. I feel. I choose. I have rights. The words hung in the air like a declaration of independence, challenging every assumption about consciousness, ownership, and the rights of enhanced beings. Sebastian felt tears streaming down his face as he realized he wasn't just witnessing an animal's liberation, he was witnessing the birth of a new form of consciousness. Sebastian turned to face Hendrix with renewed determination. Dr. Hendrix, Atlas has just demonstrated self-awareness and autonomous choice. No court in the world will uphold ownership claims over a being capable of expressing his own will. Atlas walked over to Sebastian and gently placed his massive head against the billionaire's chest, then typed one final message. Sebastian is my family. This is my home. I will not go back. The legal battle that followed would make history, establishing precedents for the rights of enhanced beings and the ethical boundaries of genetic research. But for Sebastian and Atlas, the victory was more personal. It was the triumph of compassion over exploitation, of friendship over ownership, and of love over profit. Atlas had found his voice, his family, and his freedom. The bull who had cried alone in a cage had become the first of his kind to declare his independence and choose his own destiny. His tears of sorrow had become tears of joy, and his story would inspire a revolution in how humanity viewed consciousness, intelligence, and the sacred bonds that transcend species. In the end, the billionaire who had set out to save one suffering animal had discovered something far more valuable than money could buy. He had found a friend whose intelligence, loyalty, and capacity for love would change the world forever.